On paper, his life looks perfect. A nice house, a shared bed, a long marriage. But inside, he feels trapped, silently. Marriage, he believed, would be peace. Instead, it became a quiet loneliness no one sees. He's not the only one. Thousands of men over 50 endure this every day but say nothing. Not because they don't feel it, but because they were taught not to speak. If this feels like your story, leave a comment. Lonely together is the worst kind of lonely. He feels invisible at home. Early in marriage, he felt seen. Every gesture from changing a light bulb to fixing the car was met with gratitude, a smile, sometimes even admiration. It felt like a partnership. It felt like a purpose. But years later, something shifted. Now, when he walks through the door, it's as if he's part of the furniture, there, but unnoticed. His presence no longer sparks warmth, it sparks requests. His voice no longer draws attention, it barely registers. At dinner, she scrolls her phone. In conversation, she sighs before he finishes a sentence. Even in shared spaces, it's as if they occupy two different worlds, parallel, but disconnected. And for a man who built his life around providing, protecting, and showing up, nothing weighs heavier than feeling invisible in the very house he sacrificed to build. It's not anger he feels, it's emptiness. Because a man can endure long hours at work, hard times financially, and challenges life throws at him, but invisibility inside his walls. That's the quiet ache no one talks about. 2. The marriage became transactional. It didn't happen overnight. In the early days, their exchanges felt organic, warm, and natural. He'd bring home her favorite snack. She'd surprise him with a note in his lunchbox. Small gestures, freely given. But over the years, the balance tilted. Now the rhythm sounds like this. Did you take out the trash? Did you fix the sink yet? Did you pay the bill? Each request feels more like a reminder than a connection. Romance faded, replaced by a ledger of obligations. His effort became expected, his kindness assumed. He's not angry, just weary. Weary of performing tasks that once came from a place of joy, but now feel like unpaid duties. Weary of a love that tallies contributions but no longer feels spontaneous. And over time, something inside him changed. He still does what's needed, takes out the trash, fixes the faucet, signs the checks. But joy has quietly drained from these actions. Now he gives with resignation, not delight. When a relationship becomes purely transactional, it erodes the spirit of partnership, and that erosion is subtle, until one day he realizes that what they had is no longer what they share. 3. Emotional intimacy is gone. It's easy to measure what's visible, a hug, a kiss, a date night, but emotional intimacy is quieter. It's in the way two people feel safe opening up, in the way he once shared his worries freely, his dreams without editing. He used to feel safe with her, safe enough to admit fears, confess doubts, imagine futures out loud. But somewhere along the way, that safety disappeared. Every vulnerable moment became ammunition in the next argument. The fears he shared in trust were thrown back at him during tension. So now, he edits himself. He stays quiet not because he lacks feelings, but because he's learned it's safer to protect them. Even when he speaks carefully, filtering his words so they can't be twisted, used, or misunderstood later. And slowly, this self-editing takes a toll. Not just on communication, but on connection. A man who no longer feels understood starts to feel alone, even when he's not. And this loneliness isn't about absence. It's about feeling unseen, even while sitting right beside the person who once promised to see him most clearly. 4. Criticism replaced curiosity. In the beginning, her curiosity made him feel important. How is your day? What's on your mind? Even the smallest details of his life seemed to matter to her. But as time passed, those gentle questions disappeared. Now when she speaks, her tone has changed, no longer warm inquiry, but cool interrogation. Why did you do it that way? Why don't you act more like? What's wrong with you lately? The shift is subtle, but relentless. Every comment carries a judgment hidden inside. It's exhausting. At first, he tried to explain himself, to give reasons, to fix things before they turned into arguments. But after years of watching his answers get dismissed, twisted, or ignored, he simply stopped sharing, stopped opening up, stopped trying to earn approval from someone who now seemed to look at him through a lens of constant critique. And when criticism replaces curiosity in a relationship, it doesn't just silence conversation, it silences connection. 5. Conflict became routine. He used to believe occasional conflict was healthy, even necessary, a sign of passion, a way to work through differences. But at some point, disagreement stopped being occasional. Now, even the simplest conversation feels like it could turn into an argument. A comment about the weather becomes a debate about his attitude. A suggestion about dinner becomes a discussion about his failings. He learned to anticipate tension, walking on eggshells around topics, around moods, around silences, and that kind of emotional vigilance, it's draining. When every word must be weighed, when every moment feels like a test, love stops feeling like comfort and starts feeling like captivity. So he shuts down, not because he doesn't care, but because he cares too much about preserving what little peace he has left inside. Walking on eggshells isn't partnership, it's prison. And inside that prison, his voice, his confidence, and his desire to connect all begin to quietly fade. 6. He lost his voice. It began innocently, a small apology here, a quiet concession there. Early in marriage, he told himself this was what it meant to compromise, to keep the peace, to be the bigger person. But with each apology that felt hollow, each time he said okay when he wanted to say no, something inside him chipped away. His opinions became softer not because he changed, but because he stopped expressing them. His hobbies fell away not because he lost interest, but because they seemed inconvenient to explain. His friendships slowly disappeared not because they drifted, but because he felt pressured to prioritize appearances. Years later, he looks back and wonders, where did he go? Marriage taught him to say sorry, even when he didn't feel wrong, to agree, even when he disagreed inside. And that gradual erasure, it leaves a man feeling like a stranger in his own life. He didn't just lose arguments. He lost his voice, and with it, the parts of himself that once made him feel alive. 7. Respect eroded slowly. It didn't happen overnight. Early on, respect felt natural, effortless even. He felt appreciated not just for what he did, but for who he was. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the tone began to shift. Small dismissive comments crept in. Why can't you ever? Oh, that's just how he is forgetful. Hence 3. Harmless on the surface, but corrosive over time. Jokes at his expense became normal, especially in front of others. Disdain disguised as sarcasm replaced warmth. Every attempt he made to repair the relationship was met with a sigh, an eye roll, or worse, indifference. And respect, once present in abundance, became scarce. He still showed up, still provided, still tried. But something deeper had changed. Because for a man, respect from his partner isn't a bonus, it's essential. It's the quiet fuel that powers his care, his protection, his willingness to give. And when that respect erodes, it doesn't just wound, it hollows him out. A man can endure many things, but the slow drip of disrespect cuts deeper than betrayal. 8. Physical intimacy withered. It's easy to blame age, but age didn't create this distance. It wasn't biology that drained the bedroom of warmth. It was emotional drift. He remembers when touch felt effortless, a hand brushing his back as they passed in the kitchen, a kiss before bed, a shared look that said everything without speaking. Now, the bedroom is silent, not peaceful, but empty. Physical touch became rare, then mechanical, and when it happened, it felt transactional, as if it checked a box, not deepened a bond. He stopped reaching out first not because desire faded, but because rejection stung deeper each time. He missed intimacy not just physical but emotional, that closeness that once made their connection feel alive. And when that vanished, something inside him withered too. Because a man doesn't seek intimacy simply for pleasure, he seeks it for connection, acceptance, and affirmation. When that's gone, it's not just the bedroom that goes quiet, it's the relationship itself. 9. Double standards wear him down. At first he overlooked it. Her flaws were excused as quirks. His were magnified as faults. Her mistakes were dismissed with a laugh or a rationale. His were remembered, catalogued, even used as ammunition later. His kindness was expected. Her kindness was praised. His apologies were demanded. Her apologies were optional. It wasn't a conscious tally at first. But over time, the imbalance became impossible to ignore. He realized that almost any grievance she raised was valid, but his concerns, minimized, brushed aside, or turned back on him. And slowly, this double standard wore him down. He grew tired of apologizing not just for actual mistakes, but for being human, for falling short of impossible expectations while watching his own grace go unreciprocated. A man can forgive many things, but living under an uneven scale, that drains him, because fairness isn't just about justice, it's about dignity. And dignity is what keeps a man standing tall, even when times are hard. 10. He's expected to provide but not to lead. From the time he was young, he was taught what it meant to be a man. Provide, protect, lead. And for much of his life, he carried that proudly. He worked hard, built stability, made decisions with care. He offered direction when needed, guidance when asked, support when necessary. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. The same qualities once praised decisiveness, structure, responsibility, became labels: controlling, rigid, old-fashioned. Now, he's confused, expected to shoulder the financial burden, protect the household, maintain order. Yet when he suggests a plan or offers input, it's met with suspicion, criticism, or outright rejection. He doesn't know which role he's supposed to play anymore. The provider? The silent partner? The leader? Who's not allowed to lead? This constant tug-of-war exhausts him. It erodes his confidence, his clarity, and eventually, his desire to participate. Because when a man is asked to provide, but stripped of respect when he tries to lead, he starts questioning the point of both. 11. Peace feels impossible. Even on quiet days, his mind is noisy. The house may be calm, but inside, he's bracing, waiting for the next misunderstanding, the next critique, the next moment when something small becomes something heavy. He anticipates disapproval before he's even done the thing he's about to be judged for, prepares explanations for questions that haven't yet been asked, hears imagined criticism in the silence itself. Even in moments meant for relaxation reading, sitting in the yard, preparing dinner, there's an invisible tension pulling at him, a feeling that he's never fully safe from being blamed, questioned, or corrected. And that kind of vigilance takes a toll. He didn't used to live this way. Once, peace meant actual calm, a space where he could breathe, unwind, feel at ease. Now, peace feels like a fragile surface. One wrong word, one misunderstood glance, one sigh, and the storm will start again. And so, even in the quiet, he's tense. 12. He stopped laughing, not at jokes, not with friends, but that deep, carefree laugh, the one that bubbles up without restraint, that comes from feeling safe, accepted, understood. That disappeared long ago. He still smiles politely, still chuckles when appropriate, but inside, something's missing. He can't remember the last time he laughed from his belly, without filtering, without caution, without watching how she'd react afterward. His laughter used to be a bridge between them, a sign of comfort, a shared joy. Now, even when he's out with others, he finds himself reserved, guarded, as if he's forgotten how to surrender fully to a moment of joy. Sometimes, late at night, he catches himself wondering, where did that part of me go? Because that laugh, that free, unrestrained expression of happiness, wasn't just a sound, it was proof that he felt at home in his own life. And now, it's gone quiet. 13. Time feels heavy. In the beginning, anniversaries felt like milestones of joy, a reminder of promises kept, of years shared, of memories built together. But now, he counts time differently. Each year feels less like a celebration and more like an endurance test. Another lap in a marathon he's too tired to keep running. Where once he looked forward to marking the passage of time with gratitude, now he quietly marks it with resignation. He remembers the early days when time together felt light, full of discovery. But today, time weighs on him. Days stretch long, filled with misunderstandings and obligations that no longer feel meaningful. Even small anniversaries, a wedding date, a shared memory, bring more reflection than happiness. How did we get here? Why do I feel so distant, yet still present? He stays, he shows up, he smiles when expected. But inside, time is heavy. Not because of age, but because of how little joy the years now bring. And that weight is exhausting. 14. He longs for solitude, even in company. It's one of the cruelest ironies. He's not physically alone, yet loneliness fills the room. She's there sitting across the table, lying beside him at night, sharing space. But emotionally, the distance between them feels vast. Conversations feel shallow or transactional. Even shared activities lack warmth. And rather than bring comfort, her presence amplifies his ache for something quieter, simpler, more peaceful. So he retreats. Not to punish her, not to escape responsibility, but because solitude books, hobbies, silence feels more nourishing than their interactions. In solitude, he can breathe. He can think. He can finally rest from the performance of trying to appear fine. He doesn't hate her. In fact, he may even still care deeply. But the version of their relationship he's living now starves him of peace. And so, he seeks it in solitude, even when she's sitting right next to him. Shiwu. The relationship feels unbalanced. Balance is the quiet foundation of any healthy relationship. When needs, emotions, and voices are honored equally, trust flourishes. But over time, his relationship lost that balance. His needs became secondary. His emotions dismissed, minimized, or misunderstood. When he tries to express what's wrong, he's met with quick rebuttals. You're overthinking. You're being too sensitive. It's not just that his feelings are invalidated, it's that they're erased. So he withdraws further, quietly miserable. He stops sharing small frustrations, stops raising concerns, even stops mentioning what would make him happy. Because history taught him those words won't land gently. And what's left? A man who is physically present, but emotionally absent. Not because he doesn't care, but because he's tired of explaining why he needs to feel cared for too. In this imbalance, his silence grows. Not out of indifference, but out of quiet despair. 16. He misses who he was. Marriage didn't just reshape his schedule, it reshaped his soul. Before, he was vibrant, adventurous, curious about life. He had hobbies that lit him up, friends who challenged him, and dreams that stretched beyond daily routines. But over the years, he slowly let those things go. Not all at once, but one small compromise at a time. A cancelled weekend with friends. A hobby abandoned because there's no time. A curiosity dulled by the constant demands of keeping a household running smoothly. Now, he looks in the mirror and barely recognizes himself. He's no longer the man who chased new ideas or spontaneous adventures. He's become a version of himself whose primary role is to keep things afloat, pay the bills, fix what's broken, keep the peace. But inside, he aches to reclaim that vibrant self, to feel alive again, not just responsible. And that quiet grief of losing himself, it's one of the loneliest parts of this journey. 17. He's outgrown the dream. When he was young, marriage felt like the goal, the prize at the end of youth's restless chase. Settle down, build a home, build a family, that was the blueprint. But decades later, with lived experience in his bones, he realizes that blueprint didn't include peace. Marriage gave him milestones, but not always meaning. It gave him structure, but not always serenity. And now, after years of walking this road, he can see clearly, peace, not partnership, was what he truly needed all along. Yet disentangling from the life he's built feels impossible. The years invested, the shared history, the expectations his own and others. So he stays. Not because he's fulfilled, but because he doesn't know how to walk away without losing even more of himself. And in that quiet resignation, there's an ache for something simpler, gentler, freer, a life he now knows he truly desires, but isn't sure he can claim. 18. He's afraid to speak the truth. It's not that he doesn't feel miserable, it's that admitting it feels like admitting failure. So he doesn't tell his friends, doesn't confide in family, keeps up appearances at dinner tables and family gatherings. He posts happy pictures, makes small jokes, offers polite smiles. But inside, he's already gone. His mind wanders to what life could be like. Quiet mornings, freedom to move at his own pace, peace without pretense. Yet he stays silent, because to speak the truth, to say, "I'm unhappy here," would invite judgment, pity, and perhaps the upheaval he's not ready to face. So he holds it all in. And that silence, it becomes its own kind of burden, a weight he carries alone. Even when he's surrounded by people who think they know him, inside, He's already left the marriage emotionally, long before he ever contemplates leaving physically. Why are so many men miserable in marriage? Not because they stopped loving, but because they kept showing up even after they stopped being seen. They stayed silent to keep the peace, until silence became the only thing they felt. If you felt this too, you're not alone. You're not broken. Comment quietly. Lonely together is the worst kind of lonely. Because speaking this truth even quietly is the first step back to yourself.